You know, most business textbooks out there paint this beautifully clean, almost sterile picture of entrepreneurship. They talk about drafting the perfect business plan, finding product market fit, ringing the bell at your IPO, the whole shebang. But let's be real. What happens when the market absolutely crashes? Or what happens when your top performing employees suddenly turn toxic? Or even worse, when you have to lay off your closest friends literally just to keep the lights on? Well, welcome to this explainer of Ben Horowitz's acclaimed book, The Hard Thing About Hard Things. Today, we're stripping away all that corporate polish. We're going to look at the brutal, completely unfiltered reality of building a business in Silicon Valley when there are absolutely no easy answers. So here is our roadmap for this explainer. First, the unfiltered startup reality. Second, when things fall apart. Third, people, products, and profits. Fourth, navigating office politics. Fifth, the CEO mentality. And finally, number 6, there are no rules. We're going to navigate all this chaos, but I promise we'll keep it highly organized. Okay, let's dive right into this with Section 1, the unfiltered startup reality. We're talking about the problems business schools just don't cover. The entire premise of this book really hinges on that exact idea. There are problems business schools don't cover. Traditional education assumes you're operating in a predictable environment, but out in Silicon Valley, you aren't managing a spreadsheet. You are managing psychological warfare. Entrepreneurship is basically anything but predictable. Now, you might be wondering, why should we take advice from this guy? Well, Ben Horowitz has the actual battle scars to prove it. He's the co-founder of the legendary venture capital firm Andreessen Horowitz, and he built the early cloud service provider Loudcloud, somehow steering it through the absolute destruction of the dot-com crash. Plus, he's a lifelong hip-hop fan who literally opens chapters on corporate layoffs with quotes from Jay-Z or Nas. It's straight, unfiltered talk from someone who has lived through the nightmare. The book charts the overarching evolution of a startup founder in a really fascinating way. We trace this crazy timeline from Chapter 1's unlikely origins, going from communist roots to becoming a top-tier venture capitalist, through the desperate, pure survival mode days of Chapter 2, called I Will Survive, all the way to Chapter 9, which he intriguingly titles The End of the Beginning. It's a journey of continuous, agonizing transformation. All right, moving into Section 2, when things fall apart. This is all about surviving the absolute darkest parts of building a business. Just think about the sheer weight of the brutal realities a founder has to face. Horowitz calls this overarching feeling the struggle. You know, that terrible moment when you wonder why you even started the company in the first place. You have to learn that CEOs should always tell it like it is, no sugarcoating whatsoever. You have to figure out the right way to lay people off. And that doesn't mean hiding behind HR. It means facing your team directly to protect the culture you have left. You have to prep to fire an executive you personally hired. You have to confront the lies that losers tell when they're failing. It is a crushing, non-stop barrage. For example, imagine sitting across the desk from someone who believed in your vision before anyone else did. How do you demote a loyal friend? Horowitz's brutal answer? You don't sugarcoat it. And you have to accept that the relationship might be broken forever just to save the company. It's not about numbers on a page. It's about navigating deeply complex human emotions when your very survival is on the line. Which brings us to Section 3, people, products, and profits. Let's look at the actual mechanics of managing a team. So the crucial point is this specific, non-negotiable order of operations. Step 1, take care of the people. Step 2, take care of the products. And Step 3, take care of the profits, in that exact order. It's simple, right? Well, actually, scratch that. It sounds simple, but under immense pressure, founders constantly try to reverse this order to save the bottom line. But if your people aren't taken care of, they won't build a good product. And if the product isn't good, there are going to be zero profits. And taking care of your people starts with hiring the right ones, which introduces this massive paradox. If you've never been a head of enterprise sales or, say, a VP of engineering, how do you actually hire somebody good for that job? You're basically tasked with evaluating a skill set you fundamentally do not possess. The trick here is that you have to hire based on strength, not just the absence of weakness, and lean on outside experts to help you vet them. Or what about this incredibly tough dilemma? Is it okay to hire people from your friend's company? In the tight-knit network of Silicon Valley, these gray areas pop up daily. Do you risk a valuable friendship to get the talent your company desperately needs to survive? Horowitz forces founders to realize that sometimes prioritizing the going concern means making incredibly unpopular personal choices. Let's shift gears to Section 4, navigating office politics. concerning the going concern. And this brilliantly illustrates one of the wildest paradoxes in business. Think about the disconnect between purely smart people and actual bad employees. Being an absolute genius doesn't automatically equate to being a good team player. In fact, sometimes the smartest person in the room is the exact same person eroding your culture from the inside out. To combat this, a CEO has to actively engineer the environment. You have to minimize politics by fostering the right kind of ambition, meaning ambition for the company's success, not just their own individual glory. You have to create strict, transparent processes for titles and promotions, and really master the art of the one-on-one meeting. But most importantly, you need to deliberately program your culture and avoid what he calls the scale anticipation fallacy. That's the dangerous trap of hiring some rigid corporate executive for your scrappy startup just because you think you might need them 3 years down the line. All right, Section 5, the CEO mentality, leading when you really don't know where you are going. Now, what's really interesting about this dichotomy is the stark contrast between a peacetime CEO and a wartime CEO. A peacetime CEO gets to focus on expansion, culture, and long-term planning, mostly because the company's survival isn't immediately threatened. But a wartime CEO, they are fighting for the company's life. They have to be autocratic, laser-focused, and totally willing to violate protocol to survive. The single most dangerous mistake a leader can make is using peacetime management techniques during a wartime scenario. Balancing these modes requires walking an incredibly fine line between fear and courage. Because the hardest skill for a CEO isn't strategic planning, it's managing your own psychology. I mean, it is terrifying to have the livelihoods of hundreds of people relying on your decisions, especially when you're totally out of good options. Courage isn't the absence of fear here. It's taking the right action while being completely terrified. And that leads us perfectly into Section 6. There are no rules. The very first rule of entrepreneurship. Founders are constantly forced to balance absolute contradictions. On one hand, you need strict accountability. Metrics, deadlines, execution. But on the other hand, you need boundless creativity and innovation just to stay ahead of the market. There is no magic formula for balancing these two. It requires instinct, adaptability, and a willingness to break the standard management rules whenever necessary. To navigate this, Horowitz employs some wonderfully out-of-the-box thinking. Take the Freaky Friday management technique mentioned in Chapter 8. When two executives are constantly warring with each other, he doesn't just sit them down to mediate. No, he literally forces them to swap jobs, swap titles, and handle each other's responsibilities for a week. It's uncorporate, it's kind of crazy, but it forces radical, immediate empathy. After surviving all of that chaos, you face the ultimate question. Should you sell your company? It is arguably the hardest decision of all. Knowing the exact right time to cash in versus staying the course requires stripping away your ego entirely and looking completely objectively at your market position. If you make it through the layoffs, the hiring paradoxes, the office politics, and the sleepless nights of the struggle, you finally reach Chapter 9, the end of the beginning. Mastering these incredibly hard things doesn't mean you get to relax. You haven't crossed the finish line. You've just earned the right to face a whole new set of brutal challenges tomorrow. It's a fascinating look at the completely unvarnished truth of leadership. Horowitz gives us the tools but leaves us with a stark reality. So I'll leave you with this final thought. If there are truly no rules in business, and every company inevitably faces the struggle, which hard thing will break your startup first? Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I highly recommend diving into Horowitz's book to discover